Before J.P. Morgan built America's first billion-dollar company, before presidents depended on him, and before Wall Street feared him, he was a sick boy sent alone to an island in the Atlantic because his family thought the air might save him. But illness was only the beginning. The real tragedy came later, and it would change him forever. John Pierpont Morgan was born in Connecticut in 1837 into privilege. His father, Junius Spencer Morgan, was already a wealthy banker, and from the beginning, John's future seemed decided for him. He would receive the best education money could buy. He would enter finance. He would follow his father into banking. But Morgan's childhood was not easy. He suffered from violent coughing fits, migraines, seizures, scarlet fever, and other illnesses. While other children played outside, Morgan stayed indoors. So he read, studied, watched, and learned. While other boys built friendships, Morgan built focus. Then his health became so bad that his father sent him away, alone, to the Azores Islands in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. His father believed this fresh, salty air might help him recover. But for John, it meant nearly a year without family, without friends, and without a normal childhood. Most people would have been broken by that. Morgan adapted. By the time he returned, he was still young and sickly, but something inside him had changed. He had learned discipline, patience, and how to live alone with pressure. By 1857, Morgan had studied in Boston, Switzerland, and Germany. At just 19, he entered finance through his father's connections, taking a job on Wall Street at a firm connected to George Peabody and Company. Even his father worried about him. Junius Morgan thought his son was too aggressive, too hot-tempered, and too willing to act before others were ready. Then, in 1859, John proved exactly why. While traveling in New Orleans, Morgan discovered that a shipment of Brazilian coffee had arrived without a buyer. Most young bankers would have waited for permission. Morgan did not. He bought the coffee himself, sold it, and made a profit. It was a small deal, but it revealed the pattern of his life. Where others hesitated, Morgan acted. The senior bankers disliked the risk. Even his father disapproved. To them, Morgan had been reckless. To Morgan, he had been right. And once he discovered that his instincts could make money, he became very difficult to contain. By 1861, at just 24, Morgan left the safety of established firms and struck out on his own. He was no longer just his father's son. He was trying to become his own man. And just as his ambition was rising, life gave him something more powerful than opportunity. It gave him love. That same year, Morgan married Amelia Sturgis, the woman he loved deeply. For a brief moment, John Pierpont Morgan may have been the happiest he had ever been. His career was beginning. He had stepped out on his own, and he had married the woman he wanted to build his life with. But soon after the wedding, Amelia developed a persistent cough. The cough grew worse, and eventually she was diagnosed with tuberculosis. Morgan had spent his own childhood being sent away in the hope that climate could heal him. So now, facing the possibility of losing his wife, he tried the same idea. He took Amelia on an extended honeymoon through the Mediterranean, hoping the warmer air might save her. He was a young husband trying to outrun death, but this time, the climate did not save anyone. Amelia died just 4 months after their wedding. J.P. Morgan was a widower at 24. That is where the story changes. Before this, Morgan was ambitious. After this, he became consumed. He did not collapse publicly. He buried himself in work. Grief hardened into ambition, and ambition hardened into control. Soon, America gave him the perfect stage to prove it. The Civil War had broken out. When conscription came, Morgan did not go to fight. Instead, he paid $300 for a substitute to take his place. But that did not mean Morgan stayed away from the war. He profited from it. One controversial example involved the purchase of 5,000 old carbines, rifles many considered too outdated for proper use. After minor adjustments, they were sold back to the government at a massive markup. It was profitable, but it damaged Morgan's public image. To many people, this looked like war profiteering. And this is where the moral question around Morgan begins. Was he simply a businessman taking opportunities? Or was he becoming the kind of man who saw crisis as a place to gain control? Either way, his career kept rising. In 1871, Morgan teamed up with Anthony Drexel, one of the leading financiers in the country. Together, they founded Drexel, Morgan and Company, the firm that would later become J.P. Morgan and Company. From here, Morgan stopped merely financing companies. He started controlling them. His first great target was the American railroad system. Railroads were the skeleton of the American economy, but the industry was chaos. Too many companies, too much debt, brutal price wars, and constant collapse. Morgan's answer was consolidation. He reorganized weak railroad companies, merged them with competitors, forced cooperation, and created larger, more stable networks. This became known as Morganization. But Morgan did not just invest. He took board seats, reshuffled leadership, and often refused to help troubled railroads unless they gave him influence over how the business was run. To his defenders, he brought order. To his critics, he was learning how to control entire industries. And it worked. Railroads became more stable. European investors became more confident. Money flowed into America. Morgan became richer. Before long, he was involved in a huge share of America's railroads. He was no longer just a banker. He was shaping the infrastructure of America itself. But railroads were only the beginning. Then came one of the biggest deals in business history. In 1901, Andrew Carnegie was ready to retire and sell Carnegie Steel, one of the most valuable companies in America. Morgan asked Carnegie to name his price. Carnegie said $480 million. Morgan agreed. He later admitted he would have paid $100 million more. That single deal changed American business forever. Morgan merged Carnegie Steel with Federal Steel and other companies to create U.S. Steel, the first billion-dollar corporation in history, valued at around $1.4 billion. Morgan had already reorganized railroads, the industry that moved America. Now he had created a giant in steel, the industry that built America. This was not just banking anymore. This was economic architecture. To his defenders, Morgan was bringing order to chaos. To his critics, he was concentrating terrifying power in the hands of a few men. Both sides had a point. And Morgan's influence did not stop with railroads and steel. He also helped shape the rise of General Electric and what would become AT&T. Railroads, steel, electricity, communications. Morgan had his fingerprints on the systems modern America would be built on. By the early 1900s, J.P. Morgan was no longer just rich. He was no longer just influential. He was unavoidable. The sick boy sent alone to an island had become the banker who helped reshape American industry. He had turned tragedy into ambition, ambition into control, and control into an empire. But the real measure of that power would come later, when America discovered just how much it depended on him. That story continues in part 2. And if you want more stories about the people who built empires, shaped history, and changed the world from behind closed doors, subscribe to the channel.